least 2 cups of water to thin it out a bit. I didn't add water this time, but you definitely should. If you're using homemade stock, the soup turns out a bit too rich in my opinion if you don't add water to it. So now, just heat up this mixture over low heat. It doesn't need to boil or even simmer yet, we just want to heat it up a bit before adding the chicken. So for the chicken, I'm using bone-in, skin-on chicken thighs, which I'm going to trim myself, but you can use boneless, skinless thighs, or even chicken breasts if you prefer. I like to use these though because they're cheaper and I can save the bones and skin for making more stock in the future. So I'll just cut the skin off, then find the bone and make a cut on either side of it. Then just find the little cavity underneath the bone and use your knife to free it. Make sure to cut as close to the bone as possible so you don't waste any of the meat. Now just repeat that process with the rest of the chicken thighs. Again, make sure to save the bones and skin for making more chicken stock in the future. I like to put them in a plastic bag which I'll keep in my freezer until I accumulate enough parts to make another stock. So anyways, now that the thighs are trimmed, we're just going to quickly brown them in a pan to start to develop some flavor. We don't need to cook them all the way through yet. The goal here is just to create as much browning and flavor on the outer surface as possible. So to do that, just heat up your heavy bottomed pan with a bit of olive oil until it's smoking hot, then sear your chicken for a couple minutes on each side. After it's done, just set it aside for the time being. Now, optionally, you can deglaze your pan with a bit of dry white wine. I think this is a great idea because for one, it'll help to clean off your pan, but also by adding this deglazed liquid to our stock, we can take advantage of the flavorful fond, which are these little brown bits in the pan, while adding a touch of acidity to the soup through the wine. So as I did here, just add the wine to your hot pan and cook it down until the liquid is reduced by about half. By the time that's all done, the stock should be sufficiently heated, so you can go ahead and add your chicken to the pot, along with your deglazed liquid, thyme, and bay leaves. Now just keep that at a simmer for about an hour until the chicken is tender and falls apart at even the slightest touch. So while that's simmering, that gives us plenty of time to prepare our noodles and vegetables. Of course, you don't have to make your own pasta noodles, but that's what I'm going to do for this recipe. So we'll start out by getting a large bowl and adding 1 egg along with 2 yolks and 400 grams of all-purpose flour. Mix until everything is thoroughly incorporated and a rough ball of dough forms. Your dough will be pretty sticky, but that's fine for now. You can add more flour as you need, but you don't want to add too much and dry out your dough. So now just lightly flour your surface and knead the dough for about 5 minutes until it smooths out. Once you're satisfied, form your dough into a ball and tightly wrap it in plastic wrap to prevent it from drying out as it rests, which will be for about 30 minutes. We're just allowing the gluten to relax, which will make the dough less stretchy and easier to flatten out. You also may want to dust the dough in flour before you wrap it to make sure it doesn't stick to the plastic. After that, you'll just want to hit the like button on this video and subscribe if you haven't already. Now that the pasta dough is resting, it's finally time to chop our veggies. So get out your carrots, celery, and onions and chop them into pieces of whatever size you prefer. I like a pretty hearty soup, so I chop my carrots and celery into about 1/4 inch thick medallions and dice my onion into relatively large pieces. So once the chicken has been simmering for about an hour, it should be super tender and falling apart. You also might notice that a slight film has formed at the top of the soup, so feel free to just skim that off and get rid of it. So once it's at this point, we'll just remove all of the chicken from the pot and add the vegetables to let them start to cook as we shred our chicken. You can also remove the thyme and bay leaves at this point. Make sure to taste the soup and add salt and pepper as necessary. The easiest way to shred it is just to use 2 forks like so. None of this fork and knife or fork and spoon nonsense. So once that's done, you can either set it aside like I did, or add it back to the stock if you like the chicken cooked super thoroughly. Either way, we'll just let the mixture simmer for about 20 minutes in order to cook the vegetables through. So while that's simmering, we have some time to roll out and cut the pasta dough. I'm just going to flatten it out with my hands because the pasta machine is going to do the majority of the work, but you can use a rolling pin if you prefer. Either way, once it's flattened, just cut the dough into a few equal-sized pieces. For a soup, I like to use shorter noodles, so I'm going to cut it into 4 short pieces and then run each of them through my pasta machine. As I run them through, I'll start at the widest setting and move it to narrower and narrower settings as I go to gradually thin out the dough. I'm going to leave it a bit thicker though than I normally would for a pasta, just because I want a pretty hearty noodle for my soup. You may want to dust the dough with flour before you run it through the machine to prevent it from sticking. A really useful trick with a pasta machine is that once your dough has stretched out enough, you can attach the 2 ends together to form a continuous loop, so you can just keep cranking it through as you narrow the settings. So once you've achieved your desired thickness, just run your sheets of dough through the cutter attachment on your pasta machine, or cut them with a knife if you're doing it by hand. Make sure to dust the noodles with plenty of flour to prevent them from sticking to each other. Then, just boil the noodles in a pot of salted water for about 5 minutes. Normally fresh pasta wouldn't take that long to boil, but I left these noodles a bit thicker than usual, and I also wanted to cook them beyond al dente since I'm using them in a soup rather than a pasta. I'm sure you've all boiled noodles before, so I didn't record this part, but one thing you want to keep in mind is just to keep the noodles moving for about the first 30 seconds of cooking to make sure they don't clump together as they cook. This is a bit more of a concern with fresh pasta than your typical boxed noodles. So once the noodles are boiled, just add them to the pot with the stock, chicken, and vegetables. At this point, just taste the soup and add any more salt, pepper, or water as necessary. And there you have it, a delicious, completely homemade chicken soup. It's rich and hearty and perfect for those winter months when you just need something to warm you up. So if you liked the video, please remember to hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't yet for more recipe videos just like this one. I'll see you all in the next one.